seeing a lot of really weird copes and seeds about the Nintendo Switch 2 over the past day. You know, people pretending as if they've already returned their consoles, people who are pretending Mario Kart World is a bad game, people who are like spurging out about the launch lineup and the loading times, and all sorts of weird like copes. And I talked about like some of them in the last video, but I suppose today we really need to talk about like Mario Kart World specifically, because I think this specific release is the one that's being like targeted the most, because it's like the big exclusive from Nintendo, and because it's the big like release of the launch period, right? This is going to be a release that kind of demonstrates like what the Switch 2 is going to be like and just what we can expect from it. And so a lot of people are very, very anxious to downplay this game. You know, they're trying to say that like the game isn't well thought out, the game is like too casualized, it's like exactly like 8, you know, which in and of itself should prove that none of them have played it. You know, Mario Kart World is a really interesting experience because anybody who's actually played a lot of Mario Kart knows just how different World actually is. You know, anybody who's actually played this game knows just how much they've added and how much they contributed and just how much there actually is to do in this game. And that's the really interesting thing about this, because I imagine the mindset among most people is that like, oh man, there's only like, once you do all the Grand Prix Cups, like there's nothing else to do, and that just simply isn't the case at all. Like, the game has a lot of things to do. A lot. You'll be putting like dozens of hours into this thing. So, with that being said, what exactly are the Pretendos doing to downplay this specific release? You know, like, what are the big things? The price point. You know, a lot of them are spurging out about the $80 price point. Never mind the fact that like games are getting more expensive in general. They're going to sit there and act as if people aren't going to pay $80 for Mario Kart, when, you know, the same people were already bending over backwards for Grand Theft Auto 6. You know, the mindset being that Grand Theft Auto 6 was a more sophisticated game than like anything else in the industry. The same is true for Mario Kart. Like, that's simply the reality that most people aren't willing to admit, is that the Mario Kart brand, not just the Mario IP as a whole, but specifically the Mario Kart brand, is bigger and better than Grand Theft Auto. It has more replay value. There are more things to do. There's like an endless amount of racing to be done in Mario Kart World. You know, you will be playing Mario Kart forever. You know, I've been playing Super Mario Kart for a long time. You know, a 30-year-old game, actually over 30 years old, and you know, never even bought Grand Theft Auto 5. You know, that is, I think, a very good example, just one example of just how this typically plays out. Is that people cope about Mario Kart, they seethe about Mario Kart, they hate Mario Kart because it's a Nintendo product on a Nintendo console, and they complain about Mario Kart, and then, at the end of the day, Mario Kart becomes the biggest thing on the platform. Mario Kart becomes a huge success. It becomes kind of a symbol of just the inevitability of the failure of Grand Theft Auto and the failure of the mass, the Nintendo hate community, you know. It becomes like a shining star, you know, an example of just how successful Nintendo consoles actually are. You know, people don't realize that like Mario Kart Wii sold like 100 million units. You know, huge numbers. You know, outsold Grand Theft Auto 4, was this like huge like cultural thing, like this huge symbol of just how much like of how popular Mario Kart actually is. And it's something that like basically everybody in the community just kind of wrote off and ignored. You know, it's something that people don't talk about. They don't want to address it. They don't want to like face the facts. Mario Kart is a huge deal. The most popular racing game in the world. You know, like, and it has been for decades. And it's simply something that like the general gaming community can't bring themselves to face, because this idea that this series like outperforms Grand Theft Auto and Gran Turismo and just any other like grand thing you can think of, like granola thing you can think of, like Mario Kart's better than all of that nonsense. And like every Nintendo console, this is simply a taste of what's to come. You know, Mario Kart Wii was the game that came out just before New Super Mario Bros. Wii, which became a huge hit and a success, even though the gaming community did everything they possibly could to downplay and ignore it. Mario Kart 8 has become a huge hit. A really shining example of just how successful the Wii U actually was. Just how many Wii U games have become like some of the most successful games over the past decade. Mario Kart 8 is a shining example of just how much better the Wii U was than its competition. And Mario Kart World will do the same thing for the Switch too. So again, it's essential for the Pretendo community to like downplay. Well, not really the Pretendo community, the Nintendo hate community to downplay like this specific release, because this is a really successful gaming IP that will bring in people to buy the console, and that's the big thing that like I was like laughing at, looking at this like at this hype period, at this like damage control period, because like I saw a lot of people like trying to tell you that like Mario Kart isn't popular and that no one cares about it, no one will buy a console for Mario Kart. That is and always has been a cope and a seed. It's just plain wrong. And I don't really see a lot of people really calling these people out on what they're saying. It should be very clear to Nintendo fans that Mario Kart is absolutely the cream of the crop when it comes to like hard sales numbers. Like, I'm not saying Mario Kart's the best Nintendo IP, but like when it comes to like having mass appeal and selling the most units, like yeah, it's a big deal. This is absolutely something that like everybody picks up for their Nintendo consoles, and the fact that like the general gaming community can't admit that to themselves really speaks volumes about how desperate they are to downplay Nintendo and its consoles, no matter the cost. It's insane to me, like how many people like refuse to admit how good Mario Kart 8 was. People refuse to address Mario Kart 7. People refuse to talk about how good Wii was. People refuse to talk about Double Dash 64, like even Super Circuit. Now that I've played that, I've kind of come to realize just how good that game is and how nobody I knew growing up would acknowledge it. Like, and it's going to be the same for World, right? This is going to be a game that people fight and claw to downplay and to destroy, and it simply is not going to work.